I forgot to plug in my microphone. Hold on one second. Okay, I just want to make sure. Can everybody hear me? I'm trying something new. I've got a microphone, a decent microphone that's not the built-in laptop microphone. Oh, good, you can hear me. Good. And I had it all set up this afternoon, and I unplugged it, and then I forgot to plug it back in. So so I'm glad that it works. For those of you that have heard it before, does it sound better? Is this a better sound than before? If you get a chance, just give me a little bit of feedback on that. I'd like to know, because if it is, then I'll go ahead and start using this microphone as opposed to just the built-in laptop mic from now on. So we have about 44 people in the chat room or in the discussion area right now. It sounds a bit garbled. Okay, maybe it's that could be the connection. So I'm just going to wait just a minute or two to not clear. Is this better? Loud and clear. Okay. Let's see. Maybe if I move the mic closer. Let's see. Let me just make a minor adjustment here. Okay. Let's try this. All right, how's that? Is that better? Does that sound better? I'll let you tell me if that sounds a little bit better. Okay, sounds good. All right. So why don't we wait just a little bit longer as people are still matriculating in? Closer to the mic is better. Okay. I do need a sound crew. Yes. Okay, so we'll just play around with the mic a little bit, make sure that it's positioned properly. All right. So we're getting more people. More people are continuing to matriculate in. So I'm just gonna delay a little bit so that we can give those other people a chance to get in here before we get started. But I'm glad you guys all came. This is great. I'm glad that you've all been able to take the time to come out and participate in this. I put together a lot of material, so we're gonna have a lot to talk about. There's a whole lot going on. Okay, why don't we go ahead and begin with a prayer. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum. Benedicta tu in mulieribus et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen. Our Lady of Victory, pray for us. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. All right. Oh yeah, the crucifix in the back. My kids bought that for me for Christmas 2 years ago. They bought it at a pawn shop. So, and that's an actual altar crucifix. The thing weighs a ton. It's heavy. But they got it for a song. So I'm very, very pleased with that gift. They knew exactly what to get for their dad. All right. So what I want to start with, I'm going to start by talking a little bit about what's going on with something in the Vatican that is very, very upsetting and very deeply troubling. And you'll start to understand why as we go on. Let's see, what is today? Today's the 29th. So about 3 or 4 weeks ago, there was a press release that went out from the Vatican. And the headline was, Press Conference to Present the International Conference, Religions and the Sustainable Development Goals, Listening to the Cry of the Earth and the Poor. I think the earth cries out for vengeance when there are certain sins committed, but I don't know that the earth cries out because we're not paying attention to it. But here's the portion that was really very deeply upsetting. Cardinal Turkson, who he's been a real big individual in the social justice movement in the Vatican for quite some time. He was actually the head of Caritas Internationalis in Cor Unum for a little while. And so he's real big into all the social justice stuff. But what he said in his intervention, okay, there was an intervention by Cardinal Peter Turkson. And what he said after talking about the opportunity to support the Sustainable Development Goals and how important it is and all this stuff. I mean, he went on for quite a bit, but the very end is really the most important part. He said, "For too long, we have been debating at the international meetings and summits about development. The United Nations have played a leading role in coordinating such conversations about how we shape the future of our planet. In 1972, at a conference in Stockholm, the United Nations already raised the concern that we only had one Earth, and that the model of development that countries had followed since industrialization and the limitless pursuit of economic growth was putting our common home in danger. In 2012, in Rio de Janeiro, the United Nations convened an international conference about what kind of future we want, which prepared for the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals. But now that we have these goals, it is time to act. And a very strong driver for a profound transformation is religion." Remember, the title of this conference was Religions and the Sustainable Development Goals. So what Cardinal Turkson is doing here, he's taking the idea, because it was a huge interfaith conference. You had leaders in various Muslim communities and leaders from Hindu communities and leaders from all sorts of different faiths gathering in the Vatican to have a big powwow about how they were going to turn to the United Nations in order to promote the Sustainable Development Goals and get them implemented and use religion to get people to get excited and to have a fire and a fervor behind what they wanted to do. The Sustainable Development Goals are rotten to the core, and I'm going to get to that in a second. But that was a statement that was made by Cardinal Turkson prior to this event. Okay. After the event started, and I'm going to pull this up. Let me pull up my notes here. After the event started, Pope Francis gave kind of an opening statement. And I'm only going to quote 3 different portions of his opening statement. He said, "The 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals, approved by more than 190 nations in September 2015, were a great step forward for global dialogue, marking a virtually new and universal solidarity." These are all very troubling buzzwords. He said also, "The United Nations 2030 Agenda proposes integrating all the goals through the 5 Ps: people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership. I know that this conference is also focusing on these 5 Ps." And then he concluded with this: "If we want to provide a solid foundation for the work of the 2030 Agenda, we must reject the temptation to look for a merely technocratic response to the challenges. This is not good. And be prepared to address the root causes and the long-term consequences." Now, just to break it down a little bit, what Pope Francis is saying here is that he is really trying to put the Catholic Church behind the Sustainable Development Goals. When he first took office in 2013, Pope Francis met with a guy named Jeffrey Sachs and Ban Ki-moon. They came to the Vatican to meet with him. This was before the publication of Laudato Si. When Pope Francis met with Jeffrey Sachs, who is now a regular at the Vatican. In fact, it's rumored that he actually has an office there in one of the pontifical academies, the Pontifical Academy for Social Sciences. When he met with them, they came away. They actually put together a document, and in the document, they said that they met with Pope Francis and that he would commit the Catholic Church to the Millennium Development Goals. That was what was before the Sustainable Development Goals. So in the mid to late 2000s, you had the United Nations Millennium Development Goals, and they were all towards the year 2015. Now, in 2015, since those goals are up, they took those goals, built on them, and pushed them towards 2030. That's what Agenda 2030 is. And it's all pushing towards this sustainable development thing. There are several problems here. Number one, anytime you hear the phrase sustainable development, it means communism. Okay? We are talking about a system, and it's all right there in Agenda 21, and yes, you're right, Agenda 21 and Codex. What they're trying to do is move people away from rural areas and give them about a 1 acre plot. And on that 1 acre plot, they will build a sustainable home industry, I suppose, where people will grow their own food and they'll have their own means of providing for their families. And then you'll have other communities that'll work together on building tech or making textiles and building buildings and that kind of thing. But it's all planned. It's like it's like the world's worst. What do you call it? Neighborhood, where you have the neighborhood system where you're all I can't brain freeze. Anyway, what it is, it's everybody getting together and smart development. A planned community, whatever those planned communities are called. I can't remember what it's called. So they want to have a HOA. Thank you, Homeowners Association. It's the world's worst HOA. Okay, so what they're doing is they're saying we have to all get together and we have to have these planned communities where everybody plays their role and everybody has their way of sustaining their own family and everything else. Now, this is also predicated on the idea of having a very fixed fertility rate. Okay, we want to make sure that we have this planned community, but we don't want to have too many children in any one family, because if you do, it's going to offset the balance, and we're going to have more people than we have resources. I mean, remember, you're only given an allotted plot of land, and on that plot of land, you can only feed so many people. And once you exhaust your resources, well, you're out of luck. So these planned communities, Agenda 2030, the Sustainable Development Goals, this is what this is all about. But it gets even worse. When you look into what Pope Francis is talking about and how he's talking about these Sustainable Development Goals, and he's saying we need to have this global community, we need to have global governance. They use that phrase a lot. They don't want global government per se, but they want global governance, where we have some sort of system in place that's going to make sure that we have equitable trade and that we have everybody has an equal opportunity to have access to resources that others may not have, and so forth. So you have this idea, the United Nations, the Sustainable Development Goals. You have most of the international aid and development agencies of the Catholic Church buying into this by and large. Caritas Internationalis is one of the major pushers of the Sustainable Development Goals and the Millennium Development Goals. They actually had their own website a number of years ago. They took it down after I exposed it. But the Caritas Internationalis, which is the official aid and development umbrella for like Catholic Relief Services, Development and Peace, Caritas Australia, CAFOD, TROCARE, Court Aid, all of these groups are local affiliates of Caritas Internationalis. Caritas Internationalis is on the governing body of an international communist organization called the World Social Forum. They literally marched through the streets carrying hammer and sickle flags. These people are communists. Caritas Internationalis is on the governing body of this. And one of the things that the World Social Forum is always promoting and always pushing is this idea of equitable trade and making sure that we have a way of sustaining communities. And that, so you have all that together. Eventually what you see is overlap. You see that Caritas, the World Social Forum, the United Nations, they are all pushing towards the same agenda. They may have a different way of doing it, but they're all pushing the same idea. So there's a very serious problem with this. It elicits all kinds of concerns about, for instance, when Pope Francis went to Honduras and he got that hammer and sickle crucifix, and he took it home with him. He even wore the little award necklace that had that whole thing right there on his. It had the hammer and sickle crucifix emblazoned on the front. He wore it. He had it around his neck. So there's a very deep concern here. And a lot of times I get questions about, well, has the Catholic Church been infiltrated by communists? Is it Freemasons? Is it the homosexuals? Well, the answer is all of the above, because the homosexuals play a role. The Freemasons play a role. The communists play a role. And they all have a very similar agenda. They want to break down morality. They want to break down the family. They want to break down law. And they want to replace those things with their own idea of what morality, family, and society are supposed to be. You can't possibly understand socialism and communism without understanding Freemasonry, because Freemasonry and or communism and socialism was born out of Freemasonry. Here's something that I'm going to read to you. I put together a series of quotes that I think are going to really, really open your eyes. Now, most of you have probably heard about the book, The Alta Vendita. It was published by Tan Books. I'm trying to remember who wrote the synopsis of it, but the little black booklet that says Alta Vendita, the permanent instruction of the Alta Vendita, is just, it's really just a synopsis of something that was published in the mid to late 1800s. In 1859, the French Cardinal Jacques Couture Joly published certain documents in a book titled The Roman Church Facing the Revolution. And in that book, he referred to a lodge of Freemasonry as the Alta Vendita. And then years later, Monsignor George Dillon published an English translation of these documents in his book, Grand Orient Freemasonry Unmasked, as the secret power behind communism. And so he gives a little bit of background. He talks about the Carbonari. He talks about how the Alta Vendita was established. He connected it with Adam Weishaupt, who was the historical figure that created the Illuminati in Bavaria, Germany. He talked about how it was taken over by Giuseppe Mazzini, and it was the most powerful and the most centralized lodge of Freemasonry in all of Europe. And he said it considered that wisdom particular to the children of darkness, that the conspiracy against the Holy See was the conspiracy in permanence. In other words, their fight was permanently against the Holy See. It employed its principal intrigues against the state, the surroundings, and the very person of the pontiff. It had hopes, by its manipulations, to gain eventually the Pope himself, to betray the Christian cause. And then it well knew that the universe would be placed at its feet. It left unmeasured freedom to the lodges of Freemasonry to carry on these revolutions of a political kind, which worked out the problems of the sect upon France, Spain, Italy, and other countries. It kept its greater movements to itself. The permanent instruction of this body to its adepts will give you an idea of its power, its policy, and its principles. I'm just going to give you a couple of things, just a few snippets out of the permanent instruction of the Alta Vendita. It's really going to open your eyes and help you to understand how this really is the blueprint that we are seeing unfold right now. From the Alta Vendita. Our ultimate end is that of Voltaire and the French Revolution, the final destruction forever of Catholicism and even the Christian idea. The task that we are going to undertake is not a work of a day or a month or a year. It may last several years, perhaps a century. But in our ranks, the soldier dies and the struggle goes on. It also goes on to give an idea of what it wants to produce. And what it wants to produce is, by and large, what we see in the Communist Party. From the Alta Vendita again. We do not intend to win the popes to our cause, to make them neophytes of our principles, propagators of our ideas. That would be a ridiculous dream. And if events turn out in some way, if cardinals or prelates, for example, of their own free will or by surprise, should enter into a part of our secrets, that is not at all an incentive for desiring their elevation to the See of Peter. That elevation would ruin us. Ambition alone would have led them to apostasy. The requirements of power would force them to sacrifice us. What we must ask for, what we should look for and wait for, as the Jews wait for the Messiah, is a pope according to our needs. With what shall we march more securely towards the assault on the church than with the pamphlets of our brethren in France and even the gold of England? Do you want to know the reason for this? It is that with this, in order to shatter the rock, the high rock on which God built his church, we no longer need Hannibalian vinegar or need gunpowder or even need our arms. All we have the little finger of the successor of Peter engaged in the ploy. And this little finger is as good for this crusade as all the Urban IIs and all the St. Bernards in Christendom. Now then, to assure ourselves of a pope of the required dimensions, it is a question first of shaping for this pope a generation worthy of the reign we are dreaming of. Leave old people and those of mature age aside. Go to the youth, and if possible, even to the children. You will contrive for yourselves at little cost a reputation as good Catholics and pure patriots. This reputation will put access to our doctrines into the midst of the young clergy, as well as deeply into the monasteries. In a few years, by the force of things, this young clergy will have overrun all functions. They will form the sovereign's council. They will be called to choose a pontiff who should reign. And this pontiff, like most of his contemporaries, will be necessarily more or less imbued with the revolutionary Italian and humanitarian principles that we are going to begin to put into circulation. It is a small grain of black mustard that we are entrusting to the ground, but the sunshine of justice will develop it to the highest power, and you will see one day what a rich harvest this small seed will produce. One more quote from the Alta Vendita. In the path that we are laying out for our brethren, there are found great obstacles to conquer, difficulties of more than one kind to master. They will triumph over them by experience and by clear-sightedness. But the goal is so splendid that it is important to put all the sails to the wind in order to reach it. You want to revolutionize Italy? Look for the Pope whose portrait we have just drawn. You wish to establish the reign of the chosen ones on the throne of the prostitute of Babylon. Let the clergy march under your standard, always believing that they are marching under the banner of the apostolic keys. End quote. These Freemasons had from the very beginning their intention to infiltrate the seminaries, to infiltrate the clergy, and ultimately to infiltrate Christendom itself, and to imbue their Masonic principles, their socialistic ideas, so that they can pervert the minds of the faithful in order to follow in line with their worldly humanitarian ideas that would overthrow the faith of the church. That's what Freemasonry is all about. Now, here is what we find later on when we start looking into the revolution in the church. Okay, you start looking into how they want to do things and what they want to do. We have to remember that Freemasonry was the progenitor of communism. The League of the Just, which was the organization that contacted Friedrich Engels and Karl Marx, they were Freemasons. The League of the Just was a group of Freemasons who had formed what they called democratic socialist societies or democratic socialist lodges, and they wanted to codify their beliefs. Now, in 1888, there was a former Jewish rabbi. He was also a former 33rd degree Freemason, and he was also a convert to Catholicism. And he wrote a book titled Satan and Heaven, and he talked about the work and goals of Freemasonry. And this is what he said. The three infamous assassins are law, property, and religion. Law, because it is not in harmony with the rights of the individual man. So in the United Nations, what do we have? We have the Charter of Human Rights. Law, because it is not in harmony with the rights of the individual man and the duties of social man in society, rights which belong to all. Duties are but the immediate consequence of the right inherent in all for the enjoyment of all rights. Property, because the earth belongs to nobody, and its fruits belong to all in proportion as they are required by each of the needs of his own well-being. This is basically property. That is the essence of what Karl Marx used to call from each according to his means to each according to his needs. Going on. Religion, because religions are but philosophies evolved by men of genius and adopted by the people in the belief that they would increase their well-being. Natural law, property, nor religion can be imposed on man as they annihilate him by depriving him of his precious rights. They are assassins on whom we have sworn to wreak vengeance, enemies against whom we have declared war to the death without quarter. Of these three infamous enemies, it is on religion that we must concentrate our most deadly attacks, because no people has ever survived its religion. Once religion is dead, law and property will fall to our mercy, and we shall be able to regenerate society by founding on the corpses of the assassins of man, Masonic religion, Masonic law, and Masonic property. Now, going back to what the Alta Vendita said, I want to remind you that the last thing that I said, we wish to establish the reign of the chosen ones on the throne of the prostitute of Babylon. Let the clergy march under your standard, always believing they are marching under the banner of the apostolic keys. In 1917, St. Maximilian Kolbe was in Rome. It was October the 16th, just 3 days after the great miracle of Fatima. And while he was in Rome, so 3 days after the miracle of Fatima, he founded the Militia of the Immaculata. And he did this because he saw a big parade going through Rome and riots in front of St. Peter's Square during the 200th anniversary of the founding of the Grand Lodge of Freemasonry. During these celebrations, here's what he saw. He saw Masons burning the Pope in effigy. and a banner that read, "Satan will rule the Vatican, and the Pope will be his slave." This is what St. Maximilian Kolbe said of that particular incident in his own words. "In the face of such attacks of the enemy of the Church of God, are we to remain inactive? Is that all we can do, complain and cry? No. Every one of us has a holy obligation to personally hurl the assaults of the foe, or hurl back the assaults of the foe. These men without God find themselves in a tragic situation. Such implacable hatred for the church and the ambassadors of Christ on earth is not in the power of individual persons, but of a systematic activity stemming in the final analysis from Freemasonry. In particular, it aims to destroy the Catholic religion. Their deceits have been spread throughout the world in different disguises, but with the same goal: religious indifference and the weakening of moral forces. According to their basic principle, quote, we will conquer the Catholic Church not by argumentation, but rather with moral corruption. Modern times are dominated by Satan and will be more so in the future. The conflicts with hell cannot be engaged by men, even the most clever. The Immaculata alone has from God the promise of victory over Satan. When we look at what's going on with the United Nations and we see these goals, I'm going to go through and I'm going to explain why these goals are communist in nature and why they are to be fought at every single level. We cannot allow our church to be used as a vehicle for promoting this garbage. There was a book that was written called The Naked Communist. And in the book, it detailed 45 goals that were intended to overthrow society in the United States to put forward communist culture in the United States. There are a couple of goals I just want to bring to your attention. I have these out of order, unfortunately. Goal number 11. Promote the United Nations as the only hope for mankind. If the charter is rewritten, demand that it be set up as a one-world government with its own independent armed forces. We've already seen what happened in Europe with the EU, the European Union. The EU it's like an octopus with its tentacles grabbing everything. I saw an article recently that had an image of the EU flag, and you peel back and you see the Nazi flag underneath. It really is a fascist government based on socialist ideas, and it is pushing forward Masonic idealism. That's what it is. So with this push, this idea that the United Nations is the only hope for mankind, what did we hear from Pope Francis? He said, we have to adopt these goals and we have to push Agenda 2030 because it's the only way that we're going to have an equitable dialogue to save mankind and the planet. Goal number 26, present homosexuality, degeneracy, and promiscuity as normal, natural, healthy. What have we seen in the church? We've seen Father James Martin running around like a chicken with his head cut off, selling his stupid book, Building a Bridge, trying to establish the idea that we have to have rampant homosexuality adopted throughout the Catholic Church. We've got homosexualist bishops like Bishop McElroy out in San Diego or Bishop Stowe in Kentucky. We've got Cardinal Tobin, nighty night, baby. Former Cardinal McCarrick. Wilton Gregory just got announced as the next Archbishop of Washington, D.C. He's a Bernardin protege. And Bernardin was not only a homosexual, but he was also very likely a Freemason. This idea of homosexuality being spread throughout the Catholic Church in order to degrade the morality of the people is absolutely taking effect. I mean, what have I seen with with this push. It says present homosexuality, degeneracy, and promiscuity. Okay, so promiscuity being separate from degeneracy and homosexuality. Well, what do we have with Catholic Relief Services? How many programs have they been caught promoting contraception? How many times has the Campaign for Human Development funded community organizing groups that are pushing abortion, contraception, homosexuality, Marxism? These organizations are working directly against the church, and they're doing it in the name of the church. Remember what the Alta Vendita said. Keep them thinking that they are marching under the banner of the Keys of Peter. These people are deceivers. Goal number 27, infiltrate the churches and replace revealed religion with social religion. How many times in churches now do we hear the social gospel? And we hear that we have to be promoting social justice. And you have so many different programs now that are devoted to social justice and not evangelization. Oh, we don't need to make converts of people. We don't need to bring anybody to Christ. You're okay, I'm okay, we're all okay. This interfaith dialogue goes nowhere, and they wind up actually allowing not just heretics, but non-Christians, pagans, to come in and perform their worship ceremonies on sacred space. Goal number 27. I just infiltrate the churches and replace revealed religion with social religion. Discredit the Bible and infiltrate the need for intellectual maturity, which does not need a religious crutch. So every time we have somebody who says, you know, what you're saying isn't really scriptural, it kind of goes against scripture. Oh, you're so old-fashioned. You don't need to have the Bible in order to understand that Jesus is all about mercy. We're all about mercy. We're all good. You know, we don't need to believe in hell anymore. Von Balthasar abolished it. He told us that we can have a reasonable hope that all are saved. And that really likable Bishop Barron, who is probably going to Birmingham and take control of EWTN, he thinks that we're all going to heaven, so it's okay. We have been infiltrated. The church has been infiltrated. Now, I want to talk about the Sustainable Development Goals themselves. The United Nations Development Goals all line up with the goals and planks of communism. I'm going to go through each one. There are 17. And I'm just going to I'm going to tell you what the goal is, and then I'm going to tell you how it lines up with communism. Goal number 1, end poverty in all its forms everywhere. Really? Well, I mean, what do we hear from the CCHD? Well, we're fighting to eliminate poverty. They say they're going to eliminate poverty. What do we hear from Catholic Relief Services? We're fighting to end poverty by doing our development work, which is in line with the Sustainable Development Goals. They want to end poverty everywhere. Communists have always used the plight of the poor as justification for the implementation of their nefarious schemes for imposing their communist ideals. And they create envy among a certain class of people so that they will eventually rise up in armed revolt against those who have, so that they can have too. And it's an agitation, a political agitation to foment revolt. End poverty everywhere in all forms. Yep, that's a communist plank. Goal 2, end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture. Plank 7 of the Communist Manifesto calls for a top-down approach to industry and agriculture. So goal number 2 is right out of the Communist Manifesto. Goal 3, ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. One of the sub-goals of this, goal 3, is universal health care. In 1938, a communist publication concluded that, quote, only through the final victory of world socialism can the vast stores of available scientific knowledge really be put to work for the benefit of humanity? Socialized medicine is a meaningless phrase except in a socialized society. 1938. They've been pushing for socialist healthcare back then. And what do the U.S. bishops keep telling us? For the last 100 years, the Catholic Church in the United States have been all about universal health care. I wonder why. Goal 4, ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Here's plank 10 of the Communist Manifesto. Free education for all children in public schools. Goal 5, achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. Communism has been pushing for working women since the very beginning. In fact, the International Women's Day was born straight out of communism. And Lenin was the one who said that if we want to destroy the family, we have to get women into the workforce. That's how you break the power of the family so that you can start pushing communist idealism. It's also how you reduce fertility rates, because if both parents are working, they're not having as many kids. Goal 8, promote sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. Plank 8 of the Communist Manifesto says equal liability for all to work, establishment of industrial armies, especially for agriculture. It's all the same. Goal 11, make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. Remember the super HOA I was telling you about? That's what Goal 11 is all about. Plank 9 of the Communist Manifesto says this: combination of agriculture with manufacturing industries, gradual abolition of all the distinction between town and country by a more equitable distribution of the populace over the country. Goal 12, ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. This is an echo of Karl Marx's mandate, from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. Ensure sustainable consumption. Consumption. How do you sustain consumption? By portioning out what people get. If you want to sustain consumption, you allot people a certain amount of food. You allot them a certain amount of medicine. And if they run out, well, they're not being sustainable, are they? Goal 17, strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development. This is pure global governance. It's being orchestrated by an entity with authority above national sovereignty. This is communist. Everything about these goals is communist. The Sustainable Development Goals are Marxism through and through. There is no escaping that reality. And so you have Pope Francis, who, by the way, when he wrote Laudato Si, had the Sustainable Development Goals written into the encyclical. It's not really an encyclical; it's more like an apostolic letter. But he had it written into there. He talked about sustainable development. He talked about the need for sustainability and all that kind of stuff. So all of these goals, everything about the Sustainable Development Goals is Marxism, it's communism, and it is being pushed through our church. When, let me see if I can find it real quick. One other thing that I want to point out about the Sustainable Development Goals, let me see if I can find it. Oh yeah, there's Pax Christi promoting the Sustainable Development Goals. Where is it? I had it up. This is what I get for opening too many tabs. One of the other things about the Sustainable Development Goals is that it's all about reproductive health. When you start looking into the things that they're promoting and the things that are involved in the Sustainable Development Goals, and I have way too many things open. I can't find it. Anyway, Goal 5 and Goal 3 of the Sustainable Development Goals actually have written into them. It says right there that it's about reproductive health, about reproductive and sexual rights, and it talks about the need for universal access to contraception. So when Pope Francis and Cardinal Turkson say, well, we have to have a plan to implement the the Sustainable Development Goals, and we have to push Agenda 2020 or 2030, what he's really saying is that, well, we're all a part of this big push. We're all a part of this big movement of goals for the Sustainable Development Goals, which includes contraception. And there's not a word about a problem with that. There's no way that the Vatican can ever support the Sustainable Development Goals without being directly involved in the promotion of sexual and reproductive health. And that includes contraception and abortion. It's already written into there. It's Marxism. It's Marxist infiltration. Now, am I saying that Pope Francis is a communist? He's certainly helping them. He's certainly helping them. Was he formed as a communist? Was he made as a communist? Did he have an agenda in mind when he became Pope that he was going to push communism? No one can say. I don't know the mind of the Pope. But I can tell you that his actions are certainly pushing it. And I can tell you that the people surrounding him are all pushing it. And they're all unified in this one idea that we're going to start embracing rampant immorality in the form of homosexuality and promiscuity. I mean, he's already done it with the Amoris Laetitia, where he said that, it might be okay to give communion to divorced and remarried Catholics, which is a tacit approval of adultery. So when you have the Pope who is saying, well, we can give tacit approval to adultery, and he's coming out and saying, well, we have to be embracing of homosexuality, who am I to judge? And pushing these communist goals, it all comes back to one conclusion, and that is that if he himself is not a communist, he is certainly a friend to them. And he is aiding and abetting those who are pushing communist idealism. So we have to be vigilant. As St. Maximilian Kolbe said, even the most clever of us is not going to be able to fight this. We can't. We don't have the knowledge. We don't have the means. We don't have we don't have what it takes. The Immaculata alone is the one who is going to defeat this dragon. And we've got to be unified in asking for her to crush its head. That's the only way we're going to see this through. It's the only way any of us is going to survive it. Whether we survive physically, at least spiritually. Because if I'm not unified in prayer, in asking Our Lady to bring down her heel upon the head of this dragon, well, then I'm part of the problem. I pray my daily rosary. I ask Our Lady every day, please help us. Please defeat this serpent. We've been infiltrated. We have been oppressed. The beautiful teachings of the church are being crushed, or at least hidden. The liturgy that is our birthright is suppressed. So many people living in exile in their own church. We can't do this alone. We have to have Our Lady's help. It is her heel that is going to crush the serpent. So, in what we do, our plan for fighting the dragon, for fighting all of the communist infiltrators, is twofold. It starts with prayer and fasting. We have got to be united in our prayers every day, specifically the rosary, begging Our Lady to crush the head of this serpent. That's goal number one. Number two, we keep ourselves informed and we inform as many people as possible not to fall into the trap. That's it. It's a very simple plan. It's a very simple plan, but it's a very good one. Because number one, we stay informed, we inform others, that helps us not to fall into the traps of the devil. And number two, we are not the ones who will bring about the results. We cannot rely on ourselves, we cannot trust ourselves, and we can't hope in other people to take care of this problem either. If we rely entirely on Our Lady, she is the unwavering lighthouse. She stands on the rocky cliff, and she is a beacon for us. And we hone in on her. We look to her light, the light that she spreads by virtue of her spouse, the Holy Spirit. That light, that grace that emanates from her is how we are going to fight. We ask her for direction. We ask her for grace. We ask her for strength, and we ask her for guidance. And ultimately, whether we live or die in this life, we will find our home port in Our Lady. St. Maximilian Kolbe got it right. We can't fight this alone. We need Our Lady to do it for us. So, at this point, I've covered all my notes. And if there are any questions, I'll open the floor to questions for just a few minutes. And then we'll close with a prayer. Let's see. Okay. So if anybody has any questions, go ahead and throw some questions up here. I'll be more than happy to address any concerns or... Oh, okay. Well, if you would like to join the inner circle, then what you need to do, let me call up the link here. I'll put the, if it'll work. It didn't work last time. Let me pull up the link. And put it in the body of the, okay. If you would like to join the inner circle, I've put the link down in the chat box. We have these conversations every Friday, and I change times depending upon, I try to accommodate as many people as possible. For the last couple of weeks, I've been doing this at 7 in the evening. Maybe I'll try a little bit earlier next week or so, and just see who would like to participate. But when you go to this link, you're just going to want to fill out the registration information. It'll just walk you through it. There's a $15 monthly pass, or you can pay annually if you like. The instructions are all right there in the link. So if you can just go ahead and register. I'd love to have you join us every week. Let's see. Should we stop tithing in our local church? Our bishop is not bad, but he's doing nothing to challenge other bishops. You want to be careful with that, because we do have an obligation to tithe. If it's possible, earmark your money for very specific things. You can earmark your money for the lights in the parish, for or not just lights, but go for something a little bit broader like utilities. You can earmark it for the priest's stipend. You can earmark it in many different ways. But that's what I would recommend that you do, especially if your bishop isn't part of the problem necessarily. But write your bishop and certainly pray for him. Let's see. How many bishops are responsive to your positions? Only a handful. You know, I wish I could say there were more, but not many of them. I often hear about Saul Alinsky, but don't hear much about Antonio Gramsci. Aha. Do you feel like he was influential in the cultural attack on the church? Oh, you bet. Oh, you bet. That's a whole hour-long conversation in and of itself. But you are absolutely right. Antonio Gramsci was a huge part of what the cultural shift in the church. Absolutely. We'll discuss that at a later date. Have you met personally with the church's funding at CRS? I have met personally with personnel at Catholic Relief Services many times. When I first did my investigation into Catholic Relief Services, I met with them several times, and they gave me very, very mealy-mouthed answers about how they wanted to do things. But later on, this is just within the last couple of years, I've met with Bishop Mansour, who is the current chairman of Catholic Relief Services, and some of his top staff. And, I will say this. Bishop Mansour, I believe, is a very sincere, I think he's a very good man. Unfortunately, I think that he spends more time with CRS than he does with me, and he hears their rhetoric a lot more often than he hears mine. And as a result, the kinds of things that he says or that he says in response to the things that I find usually wind up being CRS's talking points. Unfortunately, he gets convinced very easily by the things that they say. So, yeah, I've met with them. I've met with them personally on a number of occasions, and I've shown them all the information that I've had at the time. And most of the time, I just get lame excuses about how, well, we have to do this because we need a seat at the table, or there's nothing wrong with us taking money from USAID, and, that's what we get. One thing that I do find interesting is that in the last report that we put out, we did specify that CRS produced a video that actually showed a guy pulling out a box of Depo-Provera. CRS's response was, oh, that wasn't our video. Really? Because it had your credits and your copyright at the end of it. Well, now the credits and the copyright are blurred out, so you can't see them. But CRS maintains, oh, that wasn't us. That wasn't us. Which is, that's their go-to response. They always say that. Wasn't me. I hear so many priests today just bury their heads in the sands over traditional doctrine subjects as they seem ignorant of all Catholic teachings and have no idea of morality anymore. You're absolutely right. Let me see. What links can we share with people who believe that Freemasons are just a harmless group? You got to be careful with online links regarding Freemasons because there's so much bad information out there. I do recommend a book called Behind the Lodge Door. The book by Monsignor George Dillon, Grand Orient Freemasonry Unmasked, is a very good one. I highly recommend that one. There's one, I can't remember the guy's name. He was a 33rd degree Freemason. He now goes out and gives talks and talks about how Freemasons their God is the devil. I think that might be the title of his book, Their God is the Devil. So there are certain books I would recommend, but I don't really have so much in the way of websites I would recommend because a lot of them are kooky. How much can we do in our own parish as far as being an example? Well, protests are okay, but I think it's far better just one-on-one conversations and continuing to put information in front of people's eyes. Ask them questions. If they continue to defend CRS or CCHD, say, I understand that you want to do something to help the poor, but how do you explain why this is going on or why that's going on? Why did Catholic Relief Services ask Congress to give $9 billion to the 3 largest contraception promoters in the world? That's the kind of thing that I would do. Protests, I'm not really big on protests. I think that prayer rallies are good, but mostly one-on-one conversations and handing people information. That's the best way to go. Changed my giving to the church. Yeah. Oop, this thing wants to jump. What about capitalism? Is it not as dangerous as communism and socialism? Well, that's what people need to understand is that capitalism and communism are 2 sides of the same materialist coin. Okay? On the one side, communism is a response to unbridled capitalism. And by capitalism, we're not talking about a free market. Okay? A lot of people tend to think that a free market economy is capitalism. It's not. Capitalism is what you had with the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts, where they were creating these industrial empires built on the backs of paid slaves. Wage slaves is what they were called. And so they would build these capital corporations, but people would not get a share in the profits of the business. And that's in a way, that's robbery. But you also have to remember that going all the way back to our Lord's time, there were vineyards that were owned by landowners, and they would hire people, day laborers, to come in and tend to the fields. And then they would pay them for their day's wages. He actually used it in a parable. So even though the landowner is the one who's making money off the sale of the grapes, or off the sale of the wine that was made from the grapes, and he would pay his wages to the laborer in the field, and they weren't necessarily getting a return on their work. So that in itself is what a lot of people would call capitalism. But our Lord never condemned that. He actually used it as a good example as to how the economy of grace should work. But capitalism per se is really the materialist grab for an industrial empire as envisioned by the Rockefellers, the Vanderbilts, and so forth. I think that that's really the best way to examine it. Let's see. 15-year-old daughter wishes to start kneeling for communion, and the priest put a kneeler up in front of the communion. Now a number of people are hey, that's a great idea. I love that. That's fantastic. We're trying to protest Father Martin in April. I believe we need to raise awareness whenever and wherever he speaks. What do you think? Absolutely. You bet. Whenever Father Martin goes somewhere, we've got to sound the alarm. If you know that Father Martin's going to be speaking somewhere, contact me, contact Church Militant, contact LifeSite News. Those are the three best organizations that are going to be able to get any kind of information out there. So let us know, and we will absolutely spread the word and try and arrange something. Does Francis have some onus to respond to climate change as a phenomenon at all, be it staged or existential? That's a great question. The whole climate change thing has always been a vehicle for pushing socialism anyway. The idea of environmental global climate change problems is it's what my grandfather used to call watermelon socialism. Green on the outside and red in the middle. So does he have an onus to respond to the climate change thing? Not really. I mean, it's not a church issue. It's not like Catholic morality has anything to do with climate change. Maybe we want to talk about having proper stewardship of the earth and saying, yeah, don't litter, be kind to your neighbor, and don't pollute their water. But aside from that, the whole getting into the climate change thing, no. John Salza, yes, that's the guy I was trying to think of. This thing keeps jumping. Agenda 21, okay, gotta go, great. Thank you, Matthew, it was good seeing you. Wouldn't that be God's permissive will? Extinction and pollution. Why don't they teach the faith and pray God will fix everything? If we turn to God, he will restore the world. See, this is the thing. If you want to stop the climate change that we need to be fighting isn't what's happening in the atmosphere. It's what's happening in the moral climate. It's what's happening in the liturgical climate of the church. That's the climate change we need to fight. We've got pollutants in the form of heretics. We've got pollutants in the form of rampant immorality. So if we're going to fight climate change, we really ought to fight spiritual climate change, because the rising temperature that comes out of that is much higher than what we're ever going to see here on Earth. There are bigger fishes to fry than the global hoax. Yeah, I agree. Okay. Well, I am just about out of voice. We've been talking here for a little bit more than an hour, so why don't we go ahead and close with a prayer? Again, if you would like to join the Lepanto Institute Inner Circle, here is the link. I really hope that you'll join us on Fridays. We do this every Friday. We have a conversation about various issues that are going on in the church. This was a little bit more involved than normal because I had a lot of things that were going on. I really wanted to focus on this one problem. It was a huge issue. So I thank you for coming. And why don't we go ahead and close with a prayer? In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum. Benedicta tu in mulieribus et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen. Our Lady of Victory, pray for us. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Thank you so much, everybody. God bless you, and I hope to see you all next Friday.